grade receive the same CRS discount. So this is a positive because this now expands that discount to those that are, because remember, zone doesn't matter. So it's anyone that purchases a NFIP policy qualifies in Marshfield for the 15% discount. So this is a positive. So how is this whole transition going to happen? Well, August 1st is when the NFIP released the new rates. September 1st is when all their final guidance went into place. And October 1st is when all new business went into effect for risk rating 2.0. So if you don't have an NFIP policy and you buy one today, you are going to be rated based on risk rating 2.0 rates. Existing policies so if you have a policy that renews between now and March 31st of next year, you have the option on if you want to renew into risk rating 2.0. So do you want to renew into it if your premium goes down, which about 40% of Massachusetts policies, NFIP policies, are actually going to see a decrease under risk rating 2.0. So if your policy premium is going down, then yeah, you would want to move into risk rating 2.0. If it's going up, then you would want to delay it, but you only get a delay for a year, because as of April 1st of next year, all existing policies with renewal dates on or after that day will be forced to renew into risk rating 2.0. Now, decreases in policies are given immediately. Increases in policies are phased in over time, so no one will see an immediate jump in their flood insurance rates. What is not changing? Things that are not changing are things such as existing legislative issues such as affordability, forgiveness of debt, and the annual rate increases. Those are all dictated by Congress. The available amounts of insurance, again, it's $250,000 for $250,000 for a 1 to 4 family building, $500,000 for a commercial building. Mandatory purchase. So again, if the maps are no longer tied to the insurance rating, but they're still important for things such as the floodplain management standards, and to know whether you are required to carry flood insurance or not. Those are still dictated by the flood maps. Policy forms, CRS discounts, or program. The program itself isn't changing, just who gets the discounts is. And you'll see some other items there that are not changing. Those are legislative or congressional issues. I want to make sure, because I do not have my questions up there. Okay, so now I have some rating examples. So you're probably asking, well, how does this impact my policy? Well, there is no way as of today to have you give me your insurance policy and say this is what's going to happen, because the whole point of risk rating 2.0 is to individually rate each building. So the way that this is going to work is if you have a renewal between now and March 31st, you have to ask your insurance agent what your premium is expected to be. If you have a renewal on or after April 1st, your renewal notice will tell you what your new premium is going to be, but you can still go to your insurance agent because they know today what your rate will be. So either way, ask your insurance agent. We can certainly help advise on things about if the policy is rated correctly, the elements that go into the rate, but the actual premium is now individualized based on your particular building and your location. So we have a couple examples here. One is an older building elevated on piles in the VE zone. It's around 3,700 square feet with a $615,000 replacement cost. For $250,000 in building coverage and $10,000 in $10,000 deductible. Under risk rating 1.0 in the legacy system, they were paying $9,100 a year for flood insurance. But under risk rating 2.0, if they did not have an elevation certificate, the premium is going all the way down to $1,728. So you tell me, I think this person's going to want to go to risk rating 2.0 pretty quick. Yeah. Now with an elevation certificate, again, remember we said they were optional, but they can still be helpful. This one is. This one reduces the rate by another $200 to $300. Now what I've included down here at the bottom is this little red box here. And that might be hard for some people here to see, so I'll read it. FEMA has determined that the first floor difference, so not what the elevation of the first floor is, but the difference between the lowest grade next to the building and the first floor you stand on. That's how they're determining first floors. That difference is 1.5 feet. So without the elevation certificate, FEMA's saying, okay, that building's elevated 1.5 feet off the ground. But with the elevation certificate, the actual difference is 10 feet. So FEMA's got their data wrong a little bit here, but that's okay because the elevation certificate corrected that. FEMA uses the better of the two data, and again, it helps the rate. Now in this next example, we have a new construction, it's a brand new building. It's got a crawl space in an AE zone. That's allowed.
No.
Oh, well, yeah. It is, technically it's allowed according to NFIP.
It's not allowed in Massachusetts.
It's around 1,000 square feet. It's vented, properly vented, so the building was built correctly. $305,000 in replacement cost value, with $250,000 in building coverage, again with a $10,000 deductible. Premium under 1.0, so the legacy system is $881, but this guy is going up in price to $2,793. So if they did nothing, so if they don't have an elevation certificate, that's the price that they would pay, $2,793. Not on day one, but that would be phased in over time. Risk rating 2.0 with the elevation certificate, it's not going to get you back down to $881, but it certainly is going to save you, again, about $300 or so by coming in at $2,467. And then you'll see here, again, the elevation difference is less than a foot between the FEMA data and the elevation certificate data, but it's still a better elevation with the elevation certificate, and they benefited from having it. That's why we highly recommend it. So I am now going to go down to our messaging. So to conclude the insurance part of the presentation, this is what we're talking, FEMA has started to, again, as of October 1st, released risk rating 2.0 for new business only, renewals only if it's beneficial. And so in industry, people like Andrew and myself and Amy when she's helping with a real estate transaction, and Tim when he's helping with an insurance policy, we need to know how to talk to people about this. So we've worked on some messaging, and this is, I think, really helpful to understand this change. So when discussing an increase or decrease in rates, because we've had questions on both, people are not just asking why the rate's going up, they're also asking, is it right that I'm seeing a $9,000 decrease in my flood insurance policy? Well, under risk rating 2.0, because of the rating factors that go into risk rating 2.0, a structure may be more or less risky, and this might actually be the first time you as the insured are ever actually being told this, because again, FEMA's risk rating, or the 1.0, the legacy system, just continue to increase and set rates on an annual basis without really doing kind of a reset like we're seeing here under risk rating 2.0. In discussing mitigation options, again, this is something that Andrew will need to message to those that come into his office. How do you talk about mitigation under risk rating 2.0? So for structures seeing an increase in premium, elevation certificates alone could help mitigate price. We actually saw that. Elevating utilities is now a risk in premium reduction activity, which it wasn't before. So if you're not doing a substantial improvement and you're not doing anything crazy to your house and you just want a reduction in your premium, people used to say, well, I'll elevate your utilities, but that didn't do anything for your premium. It now will. It's a smaller decrease. It might get it down about $100 or $200, but it does give you a discount where before it didn't. Adding flood vents to enclosures does offer a premium discount, albeit not nearly as significant as before. So before we saw premiums decrease by thousands of dollars with adding flood vents, depending on the structure. Now it's hundreds of dollars, but it is still an important risk reduction activity and required for certain foundations. But floodplain managers now have more fuel to advocate for home elevation, which is true because most of the significant discounts in premium, as we saw in those examples, are for when the home is really elevated. So this is going to be where we talk about mitigation discounts the most. And again, the last message here is how to discuss risk requirement for flood insurance with an insured. A lender's requirement for insurance no longer directly correlates to the cost of flood insurance, same with LOMA. So before, if you were outside of that special flood hazard area and you were not required to have flood insurance, you would get a lower premium through the NFIP. That is no longer the case. Whether you're required to have it or not, the premium is still the same. So the drop at the line premium pricing is gone. And I mean, this was a bigger concern for those closer to those AE zones where you would have somebody paying $2,000 on one side of the road, somebody on the other side of the road paying $500. Those types of significant drops are gone. It also communicates the true flood risk a little bit better because that, you know, just because you're on the other side of the road, the risk doesn't drop to a premium of $500. So that is our insurance presentation tonight. I don't see. Oh, great question we have here, and I'll take questions from both the audience on anything now, and also I'm going to ask that if you don't want to chat, you want to talk, to raise your hand in Zoom, because I'm monitoring that, or just chat in the chat that you'd like to comment. But I do have a comment here. Does CRS discount impact private insurance? It does not. And I think that's the one place where there's been a little confusion, especially from our committee standpoint. Private flood insurance bases their rates from things that do not have anything to do with the NFIP. Some of them use risk modeling, some of them just take your zip code and say you have a certain rate on a zip code. Some of them take different things into consideration than other companies. So the CRS discount only impacts NFIP policies. Okay. Any other questions from anyone? Yes. Sure.
Insurance question. All insurance companies that underwrite or sell NFIP policies, are they all required to sell the policies at the same premiums? Is there any advantage to shopping insurance?
Well, you know, that's a great question. So under risk rating 1.0, the answer was it made no sense. They were all the same. It was just the ability of the agent to apply certain discounts. That was really the key, was to get an agent who was really good at applying the correct discounts. Under risk rating 2.0, we're finding, and I think this is inadvertently, that it's not the agent anymore, it's actually the company that can have a variation in rate. Some of them are significant. We've seen some companies come in at $4,000, for example, while one company's coming in at $3,000. And FEMA has basically said that's not supposed to happen, but they're not doing anything to fix it right now. So the answer is yes and no. You're not supposed to be able to shop the rate. It should be the same no matter where you go.
Right.
But we're finding that shopping is resulting in different premiums where it shouldn't. So it's in not always, but we are finding that in some cases. The other thing that happens under risk rating 2.0 that is something that we have a little bit of a concern with is rate increases used to happen April 1st every year. So I could tell you if it was October that you would see a rate increase April 1st. Now what's happening is the rate increases, so like if you have a new piece of business, so if you didn't have a flood insurance policy and you went to Tim for an insurance policy, you said, Tim, I need a flood insurance policy through the NFIP, and he says, here it is, $2,000. You said, great, I just got to do a couple things before I purchase the policy, but you know the quote's supposed to be good for 90 days under risk rating 2.0. Well, that's not the case, and in fact, December 3rd, coming up Friday, they're doing a system update, which will change every premium in the system that was quoted the day before. So we're asking two things we're actually trying to resolve on that. One is there's a unique quote number that every company has that you're supposed to be able to reference to go back to when you originally received your quote. Neither the agent nor the company is able to give it out right now, so we're trying to fix that because that doesn't make any sense. And two, so what we're telling people is if you get a quote or you shop it out, make sure you bind it and pay for it that day. Don't wait. Because if you wait a week or so, FEMA could have updated the system and the premium can do this in the meantime.
Okay.
So those are the two kind of keys, but great question.
Okay, sounds like we have to go shopping, or should go shopping.
Well,
But the pricing should all be the same.
It should be. And we're finding that it's more of a, unfortunately it's not no longer is it the agent's skill, it's more of the company's luck is really what it comes down to.
The National Flood Insurance Program, if sea levels are rising, storms are getting more severe. I mean, I can see that in 6 years where I live in the South River. The National Flood Insurance Program has been paying out more and more money, but maybe not collecting enough. So in this whole revision, are they going to be taking in more money? And where is the incremental money coming from?
So there hasn't yet been what I would call an aggregate premium calculation, meaning what is the entire old system and what is the entire new system paying. Mostly because and we've asked for that, and I say we as like the, national boards that are working with FEMA on some of this implementation. And one of the comments that we've received is that, and it's a valid comment, but it's kind of, we want an estimate. We're not necessarily right now looking for exact numbers. But to answer your question, FEMA said that everyone has to renew into risk rating 2.0 because of all the various building factors that they don't have yet in order to understand what the final aggregate premium will be under 2.0. So in theory, they should be collecting at least as much, if not more, but they won't know until everyone has renewed in. So we're talking April 1st of 2023 by the time everybody renews into risk rating 2.0. So that's kind of a TBD, to be determined at this point.
Okay. Last question.
Sure.
Home specific for me in the South River. I have a crawl space that in the old system gets rated as a basement, as a full basement, priced as a full basement. Does that not matter anymore?
Sure, and thank you to the comment. The comment on the chat was that the questions can't be heard, so I'll repeat the questions.
Okay.
No, that's fine. It's because the microphone's up here. So the question is, there's a crawl space rated as a basement, probably because it's below grade on all sides,
Yeah.
and you want to know if that's going to remain the same under risk rating 2.0 or not. It's really not. It's going to matter, but not as much as before.
Okay.
And the reason I mention that is because foundation under certain elevations, and when was the building constructed?
Before 1948.
Okay, so on older buildings, foundations matter more under risk rating 2.0 because in new construction, you're rated to the next higher floor and they exclude the foundation. On older buildings, you're still rated to the basement, but it's also much more heavily dependent on location than anything else. That's one of the #1 rating factors, and you can't really change your location. So you're probably going to see, it's tough to say, but what we're finding is those closer to water that have a first floor elevation that is relatively elevated compared to the ground, even if it's sitting up on, say, a foundation. So basements kind of push the building up higher, basically not a slab. Those we're seeing decreases in pretty much across the board.
Okay.
So you should talk to your agent. They can rate your policy under risk rating 2.0 because the rates are available, and you'll get a good idea of what's happening to your policy.
Okay, great. I appreciate all the information.
I do want to get through some of the online questions, and I'll come back to the in-person chat. Should homeowners with NFIP be concerned with being dropped from private insurance if they can switch after a significant claim? That's a great question. We get that question quite often. So they should. So I guess the real question is, should they be? If you're looking to go to a private carrier or if you're with one, should you be concerned about being dropped because you've had a claim? I think Tim, you can speak a little bit to this too because we've experienced claims in our books of business in the past. It's a mixed bag. It depends on the company you're with. Some companies will say, go back to the NFIP, we don't want, well, they'll pay the claim, but they'll say, okay, we're going to pay the claim and now you have to go back to the NFIP. We've also seen where they will say, we'll write you again, but the premium's going to be double at your renewal. We've also seen some companies that say, well, the claim wasn't nearly as bad as we may have expected, and we're not going to really, have any impact on your premium. So Tim, I don't know, for those that might not be
I think it
able
also depends on the claim and whether it was mitigated or not,
True.
So a lot of the private companies will look at what you do after the claim.
Yeah.
Did you mitigate
Great
the
point.
property or, what they did? So they'll take that into factor in what your renewal is going to look like. So
Yeah.
no straight answer on it.
That's a great point. So the answer was, the mitigation for those online, that mitigate what you did after the claim impacts that too. And then the follow-up question is, Can you go back to the NFIP? Yes, you can go back, but if you had some type of beneficial rating and it's been more than 30 days, you would have lost that beneficial rating. You can see, and the great thing about Risk Rating 2.0 is if you're like, well, how do I know if I have beneficial rating or not? Risk Rating 2.0 will actually list all the discounts that you're getting right on the policy, whereas right now, that might not be real clear. So that is a benefit of Risk Rating 2.0. I'm going to go back to the audience, and then we have some more questions online. Yes?
Okay, I have two questions. The
Sure.
first one is, my policy said my risk rated zone is an X,
Sure.
and my zone is AE, and I'm grandfathered in.
Okay.
Does that have any benefit? I mean, what's...
Yes. Yeah, there's a benefit to that policy because it's grandfathered. Now,
Repeat the question.
oh, yes, thank you. The question is, thank you for, the question is, the policy says your zone is X, but your risk rated, or your zone, risk rated zone is X, but you're in zone AE. So that is grandfathered, which means you receive a lower premium because you have your policy in place. Now, under Risk Rating 2.0, if your policy is going down in price, which you'll have to go to your agent to see if it is, so if your policy is projected to go down in price, then you would want to take advantage of that. Now, technically, you'll lose that grandfathering, but it won't matter because you're going down in price. So if you're going down in price, if you go to your agent and they say your premium's going up by double, then don't panic. It just means to keep your policy in place, make sure you pay it on time, and then your policy is phased into the new rate over a long period of time. So but the policy you currently have, that is a benefit to having that policy.
Okay. My second question is regarding protecting your property. I live in, well, close to the river, and I have a raised ranch. So, you know, my family room is below grade level.
Mm-hmm.
So when we first got the insurance, when we first had the first meeting, this is dated effective in 2013, I asked one of the gentlemen about what could I do because I have a raised ranch, that's my living area, and he suggested I have it filled in my basement.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's not really practical because that's living space.
If you're warm, that would be perfect.
Right. So what can I do to protect my property? I mean, I know they would probably go by the lowest level as far as your elevation is concerned. I mean, where do they base it on, your ground level?
Yeah, great question. So the question is, there's a raised ranch, and how do you protect the property when your lowest living area is at the
Right.
lowest floor, which is the basement, essentially. So I'll let Andrew comment on this also, but I think for insurance, there's certainly, if your building's lowest floor is a living area, they're going to base it off of your lowest living area. But in terms of protecting the building itself, there's a lot of things now that may be available that weren't before, such as physical things like flood barriers that you can put out before a storm, such as like inflatable, like some of them, not inflatable, but you can fill them with water, or that they're sand filled and you can put them behind if you think the flood's going to come through the back. They also now sell doors and windows that are flood proof when you close them, and they seal so that the water doesn't come in. A lot of these things may not have been available 10 years ago, but they're starting to be more popular because of the concern about flooding in our society. And I will have a shout out to one of our individuals on, he may have left now. I don't see Brian on here. Brian Newman with floodproofing.com is really one of the best places to go and shop for those devices because they specialize in floodproofing. So that's a great place to go.
And Brian has given the building department a lot of information. We've got brochures and a bunch of information. So floodproofing.com, that's the company that does smart vents and flood vents, that product. And they have a lot of other products available for flood-proofing a structure, including, like Joe was saying, deployable barriers. I mean, they have these barriers that essentially are plastic barriers, and you unfold them like that, and they've got cables. And essentially, as the water rises up, the water holds down this flat part and rises up against this. So the water actually acts as the anchor, and the cables are there. So the water fills up, and it won't push that over because the weight of the water is holding this thing down. And so it holds back so that no water can get there. And that's really good for non-compliant buildings that are commercial buildings. You know, some of those buildings down in Brant Rock might want to, look into this kind of technology if they're not ready to elevate their structure and protect it in that way. There are these deployable methods that you can put out if you're expecting a flood event that can protect your property. Yes?
Just a quick one too, on something like that, okay, we live in the marsh, can you kind of put that on your property, when the the water gets high and starts to come up, can you put that thing with the sand and the rubber thing?
It depends on where you put it, of course.
And actually, a follow-up to that question, the question is, are they allowed on the marsh as the water comes in?
Yeah.
We actually have an online question as a follow-up, is are flood barriers on the street in front of your house allowable? I just want to tie that into the same answer.
So it's not like, if you were going to be doing, it's not allowable as a building code measure to floodproof your home, okay? So you could not propose that as, we're going to build this new house, but we're going to put a crawl space in it, but because we're doing that, we're going to put up these deployable barriers every time we're expecting a flood event. I can't permit that because there's no guarantee that you're going to put these barriers out, and, so it has to be permanently protected, However, if you don't intend on making it part of, and you just want to protect what's there, you absolutely have the right to buy these barriers and do that. Now, as far as their placement, you certainly could not place them in the marsh, on the salt marsh, I'm fairly certain the conservation issue would not have a
That the
problem.
water is starting to come up.
Yeah,
So can you put dirt, what can you do to kind of help prevent
yeah.
the water?
And that is a problem.
House from Amy.
Yeah, it's funny because I get that question a lot. What can you do on your property to prevent water coming onto your property? Can you put up dirt? Can you put up, can you build up a dirt wall, or can you put up sandbags or something like that? Yes, to some extent, and depending on where you are, right? So you couldn't import fill. It's not like you can import fill and bring in dirt, like the conservation will have an issue with that, right? Because you're creating an issue there. And it's not sound floodplain management, right, when you really think about it. So take Bay Avenue, for example. We've got a lot of houses on Bay Avenue where they're on the Cut River side, and you see the water splashing over the seawall. It goes down and it works its way across the street. And then those houses on the other side of the street, what a lot of them have done is on their own gone and got asphalt and made a little curb right in front of their house, right? And so when the water comes off, it hits that curb and it goes and it directs down instead of going down their driveway and back to the salt marsh where it's supposed to go, right? So they have now created an obstacle that diverts floodwater away from their house and into the neighboring properties and cause a problem for them. So there are a lot of issues that get created by folks taking that upon themselves. So if you are going to make any kind of, do any kind of those floodproofing measures, deployable barriers, that type of stuff, always recommend coming in, talking to me about it first. We'll talk about it with the conservation department, make sure that whatever you're going to be doing is copacetic with what they want for your resource area. So always recommend coming in and talk to you, and we'll help you figure out exactly what would work for your property and give you a lot of resources for companies that you can talk to and figure out some of those things.
And one of our last questions on that particular topic is, can you plant beach grass?
Can you plant beach grass?
Beach grass.
I don't see an issue with that. I doubt the Conservation Commission would have a problem with planting
As
beach
much as
grass,
you
but
want.
I think one of the things, if you're in a resource area, any vegetative management in a resource area that conservation controls, which conservation has jurisdiction, any flood hazard area, any flood zone is considered land subject to coastal storm flooding or inland flooding, and that is considered a resource area and under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Department as well. So honestly, the majority of things that are going to go through our floodplain permitting process are going to end up being either conservation or building. You know, it's rare, you know, if we have a dock, that's going to involve the harbor master, right? If we have you know, a house or something non-conforming, then we involve ZBA, Board of Health, whatever, DPW. We have a seawall, it's gonna be the DPW, the Building Department, the Conservation Department. You know, so there's all those different things. We're trying to make sure that everybody's included, and, you know, I just wanna make sure that everybody has the right information. They know where to go, who to talk to. So that the biggest thing is we don't, you know, I don't want to be in a position, I don't want to have to put residents in a position where we're having to stop them and enforce against them for not doing the right thing and kind of retroactively coming back after the fact, right? We want to make it easier up front so that they know where to go, what to do, and we don't have to do enforcement. We don't have to do stop work orders, which I had to do twice this week, houses in a flood zone. And that's, you know, that's tough because I have to have serious conversations with people about, look, you have done things that require a permit that now put you in a position where, because of the amount of work that you've done without a permit and the cost to complete that work, you may have to elevate your structure where you just intended to remodel your kitchen or your bathroom, but you went ahead without a permit and you put yourself into a position. And it's tough because a lot of times homeowners are like, well, I had no idea. I didn't know. Or we just bought this house and I didn't realize this. I figured it's my own house, I can do that. Well, that's why we have Amy March on our panel now. It's because one of the things that we're trying to do with the PPI or CRS committee is to increase our outreach and involvement with the real estate community so that we have you know, clear information that's getting put out to these new homeowners, prospective buyers. They have a clear understanding of what, once they do own the house, these are the regulations, these are the people I have to talk to. We can't just go and start gutting the house and get it ready to move in while we wait for our building permit to be issued. Like, that can't happen. So it's getting that information out to everybody. It's these types of events that allow that information to happen, and meeting with the real estate agents and just coming down and having a conversation with us at the building department. Ask about your flood zone. You know, we're willing to help.
He's the man with the answers. That is Andrew Stewart, the building commissioner, and that's it. We're going to wrap up here for everyone online. Thank you
Joe,
for.
can I mention just one
Oh,
thing?
sure, Doris.
When Andrew was talking about the base flood and the state code of the 2 feet
Yes.
more for the B zone,
Yeah.
as well as even for the A zone, the 1 foot. In your flood in the past, there was a huge difference in the cost of your policy if you were to go 3 feet above the base flood elevation. I am a person who did that anytime I elevated, and it made a huge difference.
Yeah.
And I don't know if under 2.0, but the other thing is, anything that moves you out, if you think of sea level rise or all of that, but I know the numbers did count up there for reductions.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so that's a great point. We don't have that percentage anymore that says if you go this high, it goes down this much. But we do know that the most credits to go down in your premium are to go higher. Just go higher, even higher than you have to. There's no number necessarily per building. It's not across the board type of thing. But if you're considering, I mean, that building we showed that was elevated and it was receiving that huge reduction was an elevated V-zone building. So elevate in the V-zone much higher than you have to, which that building was, I know for a fact, and the premium will go down, so.
Joe, one more question for the listeners is, under the legacy secondary and primary had a very
Oh, true, true.
different rate.
Under-
What are the new people?
Yeah, so under the legacy system, for NFIP, that's a great point. Second homes had a much higher premium than primary residences did. And under 2.0, that difference is gone. So a lot of people who left the NFIP to find private flood insurance options may actually be cheaper now to come back. We're finding that over and over again. We've had a couple examples where a second home was paying $12,000, $9,000 in insurance. Now it's $2,000, $3,000. I mean, these are not small differences. So yeah, that's a great point. If you have a second home and you left the NFIP, you can come on back probably at a much cheaper rate than what you either were paying or are paying. Yeah, great point.
I have another one, Joey.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry I'm calling you Joey.
We
No,
love
that's okay.
Joe. Docks and piers, from an
Yes.
insurance standpoint, are those covered by NFIP or should they be
No.
covered by homeowners insurance?
Yeah, they should be a separate policy, not covered by NFIP. In fact, your deck, so if you have anything attached to your home that isn't part of the envelope of the building, the NFIP is most likely not going to cover that, or private flood.
Right. What about elevations of piers? Now, there's a proliferation of permits steaming along for new docks, new piers in the town of Marshfield, especially along the rivers. And many of the piers that are out there today in the recent storms, those piers are all underwater, even in the last storm that occurred. There doesn't seem to be any guidance or regulation from the town that determines, what the height is. We have a width of the pier to a height 1.5 to 1 requirement. And we have spacing between the planks on the pier as a requirement. It doesn't agree with the state, but we do the best we can. But what about the height of the pier?
So question for the audience is regulation around piers. So Andrew, and docks, yeah.
Well, ultimately, the regulations concerning any structures beyond the mean high water line are governed by the state of Massachusetts under Chapter 91. So the town really doesn't have any input on the elevation of those things. It's all going to come down to the Chapter 91 license and that structural engineering plan.
So if they see that when Waterways reviews it and they don't like the height, they're going to say something.
Yes.
And then that'll be heard as part of the hearing.
As part of the hearings.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Doris.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention for people who are concerned about access, when they elevate a structure, since so
great
many
point.
of the people, like myself, are getting older, and I did 2 structures that were elevated. And in both cases, I put in ramps. One was a handicap ramp here in Marshfield, was approved for my mom, who was handicapped and 80-something years old when she moved in the house. So, and that really solved the problem, and they do what we call a residential ramp. And I also did one on a V-zone structure, and I had one set of stairs, and the other was the handicap ramp. And the way I made it was the ramp, not handicap, residential. And what we did was we actually tied it to the pilings of the house. And it survived everything so far, so I just offer that as a solution to people who are getting older saying, I won't be able to get in the house.
Certainly, that's a concern I hear a lot, quite honestly, from folks, and something that I looked into because I did have a gentleman in town wanting to install an elevator or a lift for his house, and I had never encountered that before, So I had to research it and find out what the regulations were for that, if it was something that'd be allowed. And of course, there is guidance from FEMA and from the engineering documents for flood design construction that allows elevators and gives you all the guidance on what you need to do and the documentation that you need and what can be done. And I have all of that in the building department and can help people with that. So ramps, whether they are to the accessibility code or they are to a residential ramp by the residential code, are allowed. Definitely, we just did one on Bay Ave that somebody put in on their house. and they're a great way to get up easily into the house. You know, it may take you a little bit longer, but you get in without as much pain and effort, I think. And of course, you know, lifts or elevators, I can help give you guidance on how to get those things permitted.
What about fire poles to get out?
Slide down your pile.
There's no guidance on fire poles.
We did have a final question online, and then we'll conclude for the day. Any updates on the beach and nourishment in Marshfield, or is that something that?
That would probably be a better question for Greg in the planning department. I know that we were waiting on,
Some right-of-ways?
one final, I think there were 2 people that had not signed easements yet. The
Easements,
one
yeah.
had agreed to sign it and hadn't done it, and the other person, I think they determined that their property line stopped short of where they needed the easement, and they didn't have to get the easement from that person. I don't know if that is actually the case, and Greg unfortunately is on vacation and can't answer that one right now for us, but check in with Greg at the planning department next week, and he'll be able to answer that question for you.
Great. All right, thank you everyone online, and thank you everybody in the audience.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
coming.
Yeah, thank you.